Camille Donovan, the sharp-minded and fiercely driven CEO of the luxury retail chain Aurelia and Company, had always prided herself on building her company from the ground up. What had started as a modest fashion boutique in downtown Chicago had grown into a nationwide sensation, known for its elegant interior designs, impeccable customer service, and curated collection of high-end apparel and accessories. But lately, troubling reports had started trickling into her inbox. Emails from customers, mostly women, claiming they felt ignored, belittled, or outright dismissed when shopping in certain locations. Camille didn't want to rely on filtered reports from regional managers or manipulated data. She wanted to see it for herself. So, she devised a plan, one that would allow her to slip past the polished layers of corporate presentation and see the truth at the ground level. With her signature sleek bob tucked beneath a cheap baseball cap, designer clothing swapped for a faded hoodie and jeans, and her polished manicure hidden beneath plain cotton gloves, Camille transformed herself from an elegant executive into an average, unassuming customer. Early on a brisk Thursday morning, she stood across the street from her largest and most prestigious store, nestled inside the glossy towers of an upscale shopping district. Her heart pounded, not from nerves, but anticipation. This was the store that appeared most frequently in the customer complaints. Employees here, according to whispers and online reviews, had developed a culture of elitism, catering to affluent men in tailored suits while ignoring or subtly mocking women who didn't look the part. Camille had trusted the store manager, Devin Brooks, to maintain her company's values. Now she would find out just how deep the rot had spread. She crossed the street slowly, noting the immaculate window displays, the shimmering mannequins clad in this season's couture. Everything appeared perfect on the surface. That's what made it dangerous. As the glass doors slid open and she stepped inside, Camille was immediately enveloped by soft jazz, subtle perfume, and the gentle hum of morning activity. The floor gleamed beneath her sneakers, and soft lighting bathed the showroom in golden warmth. None of the 3 employees at the front counter looked her way. A young man in a charcoal gray vest, who she'd later learn was named Todd, glanced up and gave her a disinterested once-over before returning to his phone. She wandered toward the accessories wall, pretending to study a collection of handbags. Moments later, a tall, well-dressed man in a business suit entered the store. Instantly, Todd sprang to life, offering a smile, extending his arm in welcome, and hurrying over to assist him. Camille watched in silence, her eyes narrowing slightly. She moved to the women's section and picked up a sleek leather jacket, then turned around as if looking for help. No one came. The morning passed slowly. Camille engaged in subtle interactions with other employees, none of whom showed interest in helping her. She asked a question about sizing and was told curtly, "If it's not on the tag, I can't help you." When she tried on a pair of sunglasses and asked for a mirror, an employee motioned vaguely and said, "It's over there," without even looking up. And yet, when a man walked in asking about cufflinks, 2 staff members nearly tripped over each other offering assistance. Camille's stomach tightened with each passing minute. The sexism wasn't overt, but it was consistent, insidious, and deeply ingrained. She made her way to the shoe section, where a female customer was quietly browsing alone. They exchanged a glance, a shared moment of recognition. Camille asked, "Do they ever help you here?" The woman gave a tight smile and whispered, "Not unless I bring my husband." Camille continued her tour of the store, making mental notes, her sharp eyes cataloging every interaction. She deliberately dropped a pair of gloves to see if anyone would notice or help her. They didn't. She stood in line at the register while employees chatted amongst themselves. No one acknowledged her. The experience was worse than she anticipated. But she wasn't just disheartened. She was furious. Everything she had built, every lesson she'd learned, every value she had infused into the company, was being ignored behind these polished doors. She thought of the countless women who had walked into the store and been made to feel invisible. Not on her watch. Camille knew the next steps would require precision, and she was ready. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a mission to reclaim her company's soul. As Camille drifted toward the boutique's centerpiece, a tall display of limited edition handbags encased in glass. A male employee with slicked back hair and an air of practiced confidence approached from behind the counter, his expression sharp but uninterested. His name tag read Chase, and everything about him suggested he thought himself the most important person in the room. Camille, still fully in character, turned to him with a tentative smile and gestured toward a sleek black bag locked behind the glass. Without even glancing directly at her, Chase responded flatly, "Those are premium items. They're not meant for casual browsing." For a moment, Camille said nothing, stunned at the audacity in his voice. She pressed calmly, asking if she could at least take a closer look. Chase finally locked eyes with her, his gaze raking over her plain attire, worn sneakers, and simple ponytail before scoffing. "That one's nearly $4,000, he said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Are you sure you're in the right store?" His voice wasn't loud, but the condescension in it echoed louder than any shout. Camille straightened her posture, instinctively wanting to assert her authority, but she restrained herself. Her disguise depended on humility, not power. "I'd still like to see it," she said simply. Chase sighed, turned his back on her, and walked away without another word. Left standing awkwardly in front of the glass case, Camille glanced around, hoping another employee might notice and step in. None did. Instead, she watched as Chase walked directly over to a young man in a tailored navy suit who had just entered the store and beamed. "Welcome, sir. Can I help you find anything special today?" Camille's jaw tightened as she observed Chase pull open the same display case with a flourish and lift the exact handbag she had asked about moments earlier, now offering it to the male customer with all the charm and attentiveness of a top-tier concierge. "This one's our best seller," Chase said, his voice now syrupy smooth. "Only someone with real taste and style would know to ask for it." Camille stood frozen, both infuriated and fascinated by the transformation. Minutes passed, and the disparity in service only grew more pronounced. A woman entered with her daughter, both dressed casually, and were greeted with nothing but a quick glance and a pointed finger toward the clearance rack. Meanwhile, every man who entered, regardless of how engaged they seemed, was met with enthusiastic offers of help, product suggestions, and sometimes even beverages. Camille made another attempt. She picked up a pair of shoes and walked over to Chase, asking if they had her size. He didn't even look up this time. "Whatever's on the shelf is what we've got," he muttered, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "If it doesn't fit, it's not for you." Camille stared at him in disbelief. The arrogance was staggering. She pretended to browse further, watching as Chase's performance for male clientele only grew more exaggerated. Offering discounts he wasn't authorized to, bending store policies, and calling customers boss or sir in an almost theatrical display of favoritism. The longer she stayed, the clearer the hierarchy became. Chase and two other male employees dominated the floor, while a few female staffers lingered quietly on the periphery, barely acknowledged even by their peers. One young female associate, with nervous eyes and a name tag that read Maya, attempted to approach a woman who looked lost in the coat section, only for Chase to call out sarcastically, "Leave the real customers to us, sweetheart." The jab hit Maya hard. She recoiled slightly and turned back toward the counter, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Camille's fists clenched at her sides, her blood boiling at the casual degradation. She'd fought for years to create an environment where talent and respect were valued. Yet here was her flagship store, reduced to a high-end boys' club ruled by unchecked egos. She asked another employee where the restroom was, only to be told dismissively, "We don't have public restrooms," which she knew was a lie. Camille said nothing and continued wandering, noting the cold glares she received as she dared to touch luxury items. When she circled back near the jewelry display, she again found herself in Chase's line of sight. This time, he made no effort to mask his disdain. "You've been here a while," he said casually. "Are you actually planning to buy something? Or just wasting time?" Camille looked him dead in the eyes, her restraint wearing thin, but still said nothing. She wanted to see how far this would go. "I mean," he continued with a smirk, We get a lot of browsers who don't really belong here. It's a boutique, not a mall. The implication was clear, and it was venomous. A few customers nearby glanced over, and Camille noticed one couple look at her sympathetically before turning away, clearly uncomfortable. Chase's behavior was no longer just dismissive, it was actively hostile. When Camille picked up a silk scarf and brought it to the counter, he waved his hand and said, "Yeah, we're not holding items right now unless you're ready to purchase." She asked if she could try it on. "You'd need to have clean hands," he said, nodding toward the sanitizer station with a smirk. "We have to protect the product." The final straw came when a well-dressed man picked up a women's coat, clearly shopping for a partner. Chase all but sprinted across the room to assist, gushing about the material, the tailoring, and how it would look stunning on a woman of class. Camille lingered just behind, watching the transformation with a sinking feeling in her stomach. When the man asked for a gift bag, Chase practically bowed, saying, "For you, absolutely. I'll make sure it's packed perfectly." That was when Camille finally turned and walked toward the door. She paused, glanced back over the pristine showroom, the glinting chandeliers, and the polished cruelty of a staff trained to judge books by their covers. She didn't just feel disappointed. She felt betrayed. The brand she had poured her life into was being twisted by toxic standards she had spent years fighting against. But she wasn't finished. No, not by a long shot. The next time she stepped into the store, the masks would come off. Camille remained in the store, her instincts telling her that walking away now would mean missing the chance to witness the deeper rot that had taken root in her company. She blended in among the other customers, quietly observing, her sharp mind capturing every detail like a seasoned detective. Chase continued his parade of favoritism, laughing too loudly, flattering male customers with compliments that bordered on sycophantic, while tossing passive-aggressive jabs at women who dared to ask for assistance. Camille watched as he made a point to ignore a mother trying to find a dress for her daughter's graduation, choosing instead to hover near a man comparing briefcases. A moment later, when the mother approached the counter for help, Chase didn't even bother lifting his gaze from his phone and muttered, "Online might be better for your budget." The woman blinked in confusion, clearly hurt, and walked out with her daughter without saying a word. Camille followed them with her eyes, her jaw clenched in quiet rage, but she stayed put, needing more than isolated incidents to justify what she planned next. As the hours passed, Camille began engaging with a few customers, casually and quietly, pretending to be just another shopper curious about the boutique. She struck up a conversation with an older woman who confided in her that she always felt out of place in this location, unlike other branches where she'd been warmly welcomed. A pair of young women in business attire admitted they'd been lingering for 20 minutes without any staff acknowledgement. Camille asked if they had ever filed complaints, and one shook her head, saying, "What's the point? It's just how this store is." It was a chilling confirmation that the problem wasn't new or accidental. It had been normalized. Camille's heart sank as she realized how many voices had likely gone unheard, how many customers had quietly retreated, convinced they were the problem instead of victims of prejudice. Then, while pretending to inspect a display of scarves, she overheard Chase mock another female customer who had asked about payment plans, whispering to his colleague, "If you have to finance a scarf, you probably shouldn't be shopping here." The colleague, a lanky young man named Eric, chuckled, clearly entertained, and added, "At least she had the decency to leave. I can't stand when broke people loiter just to feel rich for 5 minutes." Camille's stomach twisted, and she had to walk away to keep her composure. She turned her attention to Maya, the timid employee she had noticed earlier, now standing behind the register, quietly folding clothes. Camille approached her, pretending to ask a question about sizing, and Maya offered a soft-spoken but helpful answer. Her demeanor was gentle, knowledgeable, and professional, exactly the kind of staff member Camille wanted representing her brand. "It must be tough working here," Camille said, her tone measured. Maya looked around nervously, then lowered her voice. "I love the company," she whispered. "But this location is different. Chase treats us like we're just here to look pretty and stay out of the way." Camille nodded subtly and thanked her, careful not to raise suspicion. She now had confirmation from within. The culture here wasn't just failing customers. It was corroding the staff from the inside out. The tipping point arrived around midday, when a young woman, perhaps in her 20s, entered the store holding a printed confirmation of an online order she had placed for in-store pickup. She waited at the counter while Chase scrolled through his phone, then finally raised her voice enough to get his attention. He approached with clear annoyance, glancing at the paper and saying, "This isn't ready yet," without checking the system. The woman explained it was supposed to be available that morning, but he waved her off. "It's probably in the back," he said with a shrug. "But I'm busy right now. Come back in an hour." She asked if someone else could check, pointing out she had taken time off work to pick it up. Chase narrowed his eyes and replied, "Look, sweetheart, we'll text you when it's ready. All right? Maybe next time. Give us more notice before showing up unannounced." Camille could barely contain herself. The woman left, red-faced and humiliated, and Camille followed her out just long enough to offer a quiet apology and ask her to keep her receipt. "You might be hearing from someone soon," she said cryptically before returning inside. Back in the store, Camille kept her distance and watched as Chase leaned over the counter, laughing about the interaction with Eric. "These girls think they're customers just because they can click a button online," he said smugly. "Real customers don't need reminders. They walk in with cash and taste." Eric snorted and added, "Half of them just want the bag for Instagram." Camille had heard enough. She had more than enough to confront them, but she wasn't ready to pull the curtain just yet. Instead, she spotted Maya quietly heading into the back room with a cart of new merchandise. After a brief glance around, Camille followed her, stepping through the staff-only door without hesitation. Maya turned, startled, but Camille raised a calming hand. "Don't worry," she said, pulling out her phone and revealing a note she had typed out. "I'm not who you think I am. Please trust me. I'm here for a reason." Maya blinked, confused, but something in Camille's tone or eyes must have sparked recognition. She nodded slowly, and Camille asked where the security footage and inventory logs were kept. "Office upstairs," Maya said cautiously. Camille smiled. "Thank you." Together, they quietly accessed the office, where Camille reviewed the footage and logs, confirming Chase's unauthorized discounts to male clients, his manipulative refunds, and the blatant pattern of selective service. Her plan was forming now, crystal clear and unshakable. She documented everything, took screenshots, noted times and dates, and even captured audio of the discriminatory remarks through the security mic system. Camille returned to the floor, hiding her phone back in her hoodie pocket, and waited near the fitting room as a young woman entered with 3 dresses. She asked for assistance, but Chase, predictably, ignored her. Moments later, he approached Eric and muttered loudly, "She's going to stretch them all out, then leave without buying. Just watch." That was it. Camille no longer needed to wonder how deep this culture ran. She had seen it, heard it, lived it. She had the receipts, literally and figuratively. And when the curtain fell, it would fall hard. The atmosphere inside the store hadn't changed, but Camille's energy had. She was no longer just observing. She was preparing. As customers continued to trickle in, Camille made her way to the accessories section, where she discreetly struck up a conversation with a woman browsing the watch display. The woman, a middle-aged professional with a sharp suit and a firm voice, complained that she had been waiting nearly 20 minutes for assistance. Camille offered a sympathetic nod and, with the air of a fellow frustrated shopper, asked, "Do you feel like they treat everyone this way?" The woman glanced at her, expression flat. "Not everyone," she said. "Just people like us." Camille pressed gently, asking what she meant, and the woman replied, "You know, women who don't walk in here with a man or a designer bag. We're invisible." That phrase stuck with Camille like a splinter in her chest. She thanked the woman quietly, then moved on, determined to capture as much evidence as she could before the final act. She continued speaking with more customers under the guise of idle chatter, sometimes asking about a product to initiate conversation, other times pretending to be new to the brand. With each whispered complaint or disappointed shrug, she added more weight to the mental dossier she had been compiling since entering. The store had become a stage for entitlement, with Chase and his enablers playing lead roles in a culture built on exclusion and ego. Then came the moment that would light the match on everything. A young woman entered the store with a confident gait and a curious sparkle in her eye, clearly excited. She approached the jewelry counter and asked to see a bracelet, a custom piece worth several $100s. Chase, leaning against the glass, didn't even lift his head when he replied, "Do you have a partner buying it for you?" The woman, confused, said no, that she was treating herself. Chase chuckled, then looked up and said, "I'm not sure that one's in your range. We usually don't pull those out unless the buyer's serious." Camille's blood turned to ice. The young woman stiffened, visibly hurt, but tried again. "I saw it online and called this morning. Someone said it would be held for me." Chase finally stood straight, gave a fake smile, and said, "I don't remember hearing about that, but you can look around while I double-check." Then he turned and walked toward the back, without even checking the register or asking her name. Camille approached the woman gently and asked if she was okay. She nodded but blinked rapidly, clearly holding back frustration. "I just got a promotion," she said, trying to smile. "I wanted to celebrate, but I guess I should have worn heels and makeup." Camille swallowed the anger rising in her throat and reassured her softly, "You deserve to be here, exactly as you are." The woman gave a half-smile, thanked her, and wandered off. That was when Camille saw something that made her snap to attention. Chase, now in the back room, was visible through the corner mirror, stuffing something small and velvet into a drawer, shaking his head and muttering to Eric, who stood by laughing. He wasn't checking anything. He was deliberately hiding the bracelet to keep it from the customer who didn't fit his vision of wealth or worth. Camille walked calmly but quickly to the back office again, where Maya was sorting merchandise. "I need your help one more time," she said. "Can you retrieve the bracelet Chase just put away? It was held for a customer who's still waiting." Maya blinked, hesitant, but nodded. "I saw the hold tag this morning," she whispered. Moments later, Maya returned with the bracelet and the printed hold request still clipped to the box. Camille thanked her and said, "Keep watching. It's almost time." With the bracelet in her hand and her phone now set to discreetly record, Camille returned to the floor and approached the young customer, who was seated quietly near the shoes, visibly deflated. "Excuse me," Camille said kindly. "I believe this was meant for you." She handed her the box, watched her eyes light up, and gently explained, "I think there was a mistake in the back." The woman thanked her profusely, too touched to ask how Camille had it, and left with her purchase held tightly to her chest. Meanwhile, Chase reemerged on the floor, looked around, and scowled when he noticed the bracelet was missing. He whispered something to Eric, who shrugged and smirked, clearly amused. Camille had seen enough. She took a deep breath and moved toward the center of the store, where the ornate rug and golden light created a perfect stage. She turned toward Maya and said calmly, "Can you please call a staff meeting? Right now." Maya paused, eyes wide, then nodded. "Of course." Within minutes, the employees began to gather near the main register, confused but compliant. Customers lingered curiously, sensing something unusual. Chase appeared last, looking irritated. "What is this about?" he demanded. Camille turned to face them, removed her cap, pulled the hair tie from her ponytail, and allowed her dark curls to fall naturally to her shoulders. The hoodie came off next, revealing a silk blouse underneath, subtle but unmistakably high-end. Murmurs began to rise among the employees, especially Maya, who covered her mouth in shock. Chase's eyes narrowed, his confidence momentarily faltering. "I think introductions are in order," Camille said, her voice now clear and commanding. "I'm Camille Donovan, founder and CEO of Aurelia and Company." The silence was instant, the kind that bends the air around it. Eric took an unconscious step backward. Maya gasped audibly. Chase stared, as if trying to compute what was happening, but his smirk had completely vanished. "I've been here all morning," Camille continued, "and I've seen how you run this store when no one is watching, or so you thought." She turned toward Chase, locking eyes with him, Your behavior is not only disgraceful, it's dangerous to everything this brand stands for. You humiliated customers, dismissed women, sabotaged orders, and created a culture that excludes and shames. And you did it with pride. Chase opened his mouth, but no words came. Camille held up her phone, then looked around the staff. I've recorded everything. The lies, the mockery, the manipulation. She shifted her gaze to the others. If you stood by and said nothing, you're complicit. That ends today. She addressed Maya last, offering a small nod. There are some who showed integrity here, and they will be recognized. But the rest? Camille looked toward Chase one last time. You'll never represent this brand again. A pin could have dropped in the silence that followed. Even the music, which played softly through hidden speakers, seemed to dim in reverence to the moment. Customers who had paused to watch began clapping quietly, and then louder. Camille stood firm, her presence no longer cloaked in mystery or modesty. She had revealed herself not with grandeur but with undeniable authority, delivering the reckoning that had been long overdue. And while the confrontation had ended, the real transformation was only just beginning. The days following Camille Donovan's explosive reveal rippled like a shockwave through the entire company, shaking the foundations not only of the flagship store but of Aurelia and Company's broader network. As word of the incident spread internally, headquarters buzzed with a mixture of stunned silence and quiet admiration. Many staff members humbled by the CEO's personal infiltration and direct confrontation. Camille wasted no time. The very next morning, she summoned her executive team, store managers, and regional supervisors for an emergency summit at the company's headquarters, where she laid out the extent of the cultural failure she had uncovered. Her tone was firm but impassioned, a mix of disappointment and renewed determination. She presented not only video and audio recordings, but handwritten notes and testimonials gathered during her visit, offering an unfiltered view of the discrimination, apathy, and systemic favoritism that had taken root. No one dared to challenge her, not when the evidence was laid bare, and certainly not when it came from the founder herself. The first action was swift and uncompromising. Chase was terminated immediately, escorted out by security after being informed via formal letter, signed by Camille, that he was permanently banned from any future involvement with the company. Eric and several other staff members at the flagship location were also dismissed following an internal investigation that revealed patterns of inappropriate conduct and negligence. Camille personally oversaw the disciplinary process, making it clear that leadership wasn't simply cutting out the most visible problems, they were excavating the deeper ones. For Maya, however, things changed overnight. Camille promoted her to acting store supervisor on the spot, offering her not only a raise but a mentorship opportunity under the company's senior director of retail training. Maya wept openly in the office when the offer was extended, overwhelmed by the gesture and the validation of her integrity under pressure. Camille didn't stop there. She sent a company-wide communication acknowledging the events, taking responsibility for the lapse in oversight, and outlining a comprehensive reform strategy to reshape Aurelia and Company's in-store culture. At the heart of the reform was a new initiative called Walk in Their Shoes, a program designed to immerse corporate executives and store leaders in the real-world customer experience at ground level. Every month, managers would go undercover, unannounced and without exception, to assess the authenticity of their customer service environment. Camille modeled it after her own experience, believing strongly that no spreadsheet or report could replace what the human eye and heart could observe firsthand. The company also partnered with a third-party inclusion consultant to review hiring practices, unconscious bias training, and employee evaluations, implementing monthly equity audits across all branches. These weren't just hollow promises or surface-level corrections. They were sweeping, structural changes grounded in accountability and measurable action. Within 2 weeks, all employees, from seasonal clerks to regional directors, were required to complete a mandatory retraining course focused on respectful service, inclusive language, and emotional intelligence, all reinforced with real scenarios drawn from Camille's undercover visit. Camille took things even further by launching the Aurelia Empowerment Fund, a program dedicated to supporting underrepresented employees with scholarships for professional development, access to leadership seminars, and mentorships with senior staff. For customers, She announced a new feedback platform that prioritized transparency and accessibility, allowing shoppers to report experiences anonymously and receive real-time responses from district supervisors. This platform was paired with a new public commitment statement posted in every store window, reminding staff and visitors alike that Aurelia and Company stood for inclusion, respect, and excellence, not just in style, but in service. The flagship store reopened a week after Chase's removal under Maya's leadership and looked noticeably different, not in aesthetics, but in energy. Customers were greeted warmly, without prejudice. Employees moved through the space with purpose and openness. A sense of dignity had returned, as if the space had exhaled something it didn't realize it had been holding in. Camille returned to the flagship store unannounced on the second weekend after the incident, this time dressed in her usual elegant attire. She was greeted at the door with a bright smile by a new hire who offered her a beverage and genuine eye contact. Camille wandered through the store and felt it. An ease, a warmth, a sense that this was once again the brand she had built with heart and grit. Maya noticed her from across the floor and, after checking in on a customer, approached respectfully. "It's working," she said simply. Camille smiled. "It's just the beginning." And it was. The story of the undercover CEO began to spread outside company walls when a customer who had witnessed the in-store confrontation wrote a detailed blog post titled, "The Woman Who Changed Everything." The post went viral, attracting attention from national media outlets, diversity advocates, and business leaders. Camille declined interview requests at first, wanting the focus to remain on the company's internal reform, but eventually released a written statement emphasizing the importance of walking through your business the way a stranger might, with humility, curiosity, and courage. The viral moment didn't become a spectacle, it became a movement. Other companies began asking how they could replicate Aurelia's accountability model. Camille, once a relatively private CEO, became an icon of principled leadership. She spoke at conferences, wrote op-eds about ethical entrepreneurship, and was eventually invited to participate in a task force on retail discrimination reform. But despite the attention and accolades, she remained grounded in the same principles that had led her into the store that day. Not ego, not control, but care. For Camille, it was never about exposing one man or even one store. It was about reclaiming the soul of the brand she had built. She knew that lasting change wasn't measured in press releases or viral posts, but in the quiet moments when a customer felt seen, respected, and welcomed without needing to fit someone else's mold. Her company's reputation, once shaken, now stood taller than ever, restored not by PR, but by a return to values, lived out in every aisle, every conversation, every choice. Inside the redesigned employee handbook, distributed across all stores and signed at the front by Camille herself, a new message appeared in bold print on the opening page. Respect is not an upgrade, it's the standard. It became a mantra, repeated during new hire orientations and printed on discreet lapel pins worn by employees. Maya, now officially appointed as store manager 3 months later, led her team with empathy and clarity, drawing from the storm that had reshaped everything. The store's customer satisfaction ratings soared. Loyalty program memberships increased. Online testimonials began pouring in praising not just the products but the people. And while the shadows of the past still lingered faintly, they served as a reminder, one Camille welcomed, because she knew that sometimes the only way to restore the shine of a crown is to wear it into the fire and come out stronger on the other side. The impact of Camille's actions didn't stop within the marble floors and glass walls of Aurelia and Company. It spilled into the public domain like wildfire, igniting conversations that reached far beyond the world of fashion retail. The blog post detailing her undercover experience had struck a nerve in society, capturing the imagination of everyday people who had, at one point or another, felt unseen in a space where they were supposed to belong. The story was picked up by major news outlets within days, with headlines like, "CEO goes undercover and fires sexist staff on the spot," and "Retail royalty takes justice into her own hands," spreading rapidly across social media platforms. Clips from the store's security footage, carefully released by the company with blurred faces and edited audio, showcased the stark contrast in how customers had been treated: men welcomed with charm, women disregarded with indifference. The visuals were powerful, but it was Camille's composed, commanding voice in the meeting, captured by her own phone and later broadcasted in snippets, that truly captivated people. "You'll never represent this brand again," she had said to Chase, and those words became a rallying cry online. Memes, video edits, and even reenactments flooded TikTok and Instagram, transforming Camille into an unexpected symbol of corporate accountability. Young women posted videos thanking her for proving that leadership could mean empathy, strength, and fearlessness. Retail workers from other companies began sharing their own stories of discrimination and toxicity under the hashtag Respect is the Standard, which was quickly adopted by Aurelia and company in a subtle but deliberate campaign that included billboard ads, branded packaging, and a limited-run clothing tag bearing the slogan. Camille herself maintained a dignified distance from the noise, granting only one live interview on a popular business podcast where she spoke calmly about the responsibility of leadership, her upbringing in a working-class family, and the importance of listening to the people who interact with your brand every day. "A store is not just its walls or merchandise," she said. "It's a living ecosystem, and if any part is poisoned by ego or bias, the whole system suffers." The quote was printed in magazines and echoed across online platforms, cementing her message in the cultural consciousness. But Camille knew that no matter how viral the moment became, the real work was not in riding the wave. It was in anchoring change. She redoubled efforts behind the scenes to keep the movement from becoming a passing trend. She launched partnerships with women-led nonprofits focused on career development, providing internships and job placement assistance through the Aurelia Empowerment Fund. She also rolled out a scholarship initiative for employees pursuing education in management, customer service, or business ethics, including full tuition coverage for part-time workers who wanted to grow within the company. Internally, she created a rotating advisory council made up entirely of frontline staff from different regions, store clerks, inventory managers, greeters, who met quarterly with executives to provide raw feedback, ensuring the top brass never lost sight of the ground floor. Camille personally attended the first 2 meetings, taking notes, asking questions, and thanking every member for their honesty. "You're not just staff," she told them. "You're the pulse of this company." The customer base responded in kind. Sales surged in the months that followed, not just from curiosity or trend-driven interest, but from genuine appreciation. Women of all backgrounds began shopping at Aurelia and Company with renewed confidence, leaving glowing reviews online and flooding the company's inbox with stories of how they were finally treated with the dignity they deserved. In one store, a woman walked in with tears in her eyes, holding her teenage daughter's hand, and said, "We're here because your CEO reminded me that I matter." The staff offered them tea, listened to their story, and helped them find a dress for the girl's first job interview. It wasn't just customer service, it was restoration. Employees, too, seemed transformed. New hires were trained in the revamped onboarding program Camille had built, which didn't just teach sales techniques but included sessions on empathy, bias, body language, and the power of inclusion. The flagship store even hosted monthly open forums where staff could share challenges and ideas, and Camille occasionally dropped in via video call to listen. Of course, not everyone embraced the changes. A small but vocal minority criticized Camille's approach as performative or heavy-handed, suggesting that the viral moment had been orchestrated. Others accused the company of pandering or virtue signaling. But Camille remained unshaken, responding only with continued action and consistent results. "Accountability isn't performative," she wrote in a brief statement. "It's responsible." When a media outlet ran a feature titled "The Woman Who Fired Her Way to Fame," Camille refused to participate in the story, declining to center herself over the greater mission. "This isn't about fame," she said quietly to her communications director. "It's about correcting the course, about healing what we didn't know was broken." The comment was never publicized, but it underscored everything Camille stood for. Even as speaking invitations poured in from leadership forums and business schools, Camille chose her appearances carefully, focusing on events where dialogue led to tangible solutions. She wasn't interested in applause. She wanted impact. Internally, the culture began to shift in noticeable ways. Teams reported higher morale, better collaboration, and a renewed sense of pride in wearing the Aurelia badge. Store managers started holding weekly customer spotlight meetings, where they shared positive feedback and reflected on ways they could have done better. It wasn't just policy change, it was emotional rewiring. Camille's leadership had broken open a long-ignored truth in the retail world: that style means nothing without substance, and presentation without kindness is hollow. For the first time in years, she felt a deep connection to the heartbeat of her business, to the people who kept it alive not with spreadsheets or stock trends, but with smiles, patience, and genuine human connection. And while she continued to oversee major business operations, Camille made it a priority to visit stores unannounced every few weeks, not to catch people off guard, but to remind them that leadership was watching, not with scrutiny, but with care. In the end, Aurelia and Company became more than a brand. It became a symbol, not of perfection, but of progress, not of punishment, but of purpose. The words Camille had spoken in that store, in front of the staff who had underestimated her, now lived on in more than just memory. They were etched into policy, stitched into training manuals, and echoed in the voices of customers who finally felt seen. "You'll never represent this brand again," had been the beginning of a necessary ending. What followed was the rebirth of a company that had wandered from its roots, only to find them again in the eyes of its forgotten customers and the courage of its founder. Camille stood quietly in her office one evening, watching a clip from one of the training sessions where Maya, now a regional mentor, was speaking to a room of new hires. "Service is about more than selling," Maya said. "It's about seeing people. That's what changed this place. That's what saved us." Camille smiled to herself, knowing the torch had been passed, not just to Maya, but to every hand willing to carry it forward.